I'm David Fleming from the Disciples Ignited YouTube channel, where we're focused on Jesus, advancing his kingdom, and preparing his disciples. Now, we're in this new series where we're studying about revival outpourings that have taken place throughout church history, and we've been focusing in on the Great Awakening over the past couple of videos, especially in the life and ministry of Jonathan Edwards, which was one of the main leaders of this Great Awakening that took place in America in the 1700s. Now, Edwards was wise to keep his ministry in balance, especially his preaching. He emphasized the love of God, but he was not afraid to deal with the fact that God is a righteous and holy judge. Now, when the revival peaked again in the Great Awakening during 1740 to 1742, Edwards was preaching a series of messages on the love of God. However, on July the 8th, 1741, Edwards preached a message in Enfield, Connecticut, that is probably the most famous message that has ever been recorded in history, that used to be in the history books that I read as a child in junior high and high school. You can still find it on the web, and that the name of that message was "Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God." You got to look it up. I'm going to read you just one of the lighter portions of the message. But remember, God didn't use Edwards because he was a great oracle speaker. In fact, he wrote his messages down and read them in a monotone way. That was the norm for the day. But he was highly anointed. He prayed and he fasted several days before giving this message to his people. But the reason, the thing that was an impetus behind this is many of his people that were members of his church, because of the norm of that day, people were allowed to join the church and not even profess to be Christians. I mean, you had to go to church if you were going to be acceptable in society. And so most of his people really did not know the Lord. Now, I'm sure many of them had come to the Lord during the beginning of the revival outpouring, but he still had this great desire that everybody that goes to church really have an encounter with Jesus. So when he was preaching in Connecticut, his church was in Massachusetts, but when he was preaching in Connecticut, this the sinners in the hands of an angry God, God moved. Let me read you part of it. And I quote, "The sun does not willingly shine upon you to give you light to serve sin and Satan. The earth does not willingly yield her increase to satisfy your lust, nor is it willingly a stage for your wickedness to be acted upon. The air does not willingly serve you for breath to maintain the flame of life in your vitals while you spend your life in the service of God's enemies." And then he went on. "And let everyone that is yet out of Christ and hanging over the pit of hell, whether they be old men and women, or middle-aged, or young people, or little children, now hearken to the loud calls of God's word and providence. This acceptable year of the Lord, a day of great mercy to some, will doubtless be a day of his remarkable vengeance to others. Men's hearts harden and their guilt increases apace at such a day as this, if they neglect their souls. Never was there a period when so many means were employed for the salvation of souls. And if you entirely neglect them, you will eternally curse the day of your birth." Well, he went on to preach, and the move of God was so powerful that people began to cry out, wail, crying, sobbing, gripping the pews in front of them, gripping the columns that held up the church, crying out, "Lord, what must we do to be saved? Save us." Some were even sensing that they were slipping into hell. God moved that day, but he wasn't finished. See me tomorrow.